What will your answer be, Mr. Biden? To whom has been given great power, of him is required even greater responsibility. However, history teaches us that those to whom great power has been given usually abscond from or dodge that greater responsibility. Those with the great power seek only to gain more of that great power. Mr. Biden has been given great power as the leader of the most powerful country in the world. However, he has been absconding from and dodging his greater responsibility. At this moment in history, Mr. Biden is required to save and preserve America's democracy and to safeguard and ensure the well-being and survival of the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank. Mr. Biden, you have decided to put the preservation of America's democracy on the shoulders of your Rainbow Coalition. Because of your administration's actions and complicity with the Israeli government to annihilate the Palestinian people in Gaza, the large parts of that coalition that was crucial to your victory in the American 2020 elections, on whose shoulders you are now trying to put the responsibility of preserving America's democracy, have begun to abandon you. This Rainbow Coalition comprises young people 18 to 34 years, Black and Latina, Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab voters. You're betting that this coalition loves America so much that they will vote for you at the end of the day when the reality of their choices hits them in November. Mr. Biden, you are wrong. Unlike you, there are people who are principled and value all human life, no matter the mask. What is happening in Gaza is personal for many Arabs, Muslim, and Palestinians, especially Palestinians, who are seeing day in and day out their mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents, nieces, nephews, friends, and neighbors slaughtered live and direct, made to become lowly beasts of the fields who have to eat grass and animal fodder to survive. Even the grass is becoming a scarce commodity as the Israeli Defense Forces have razed and destroyed it. Not surprising, because those were the orders given by their Prime Minister in his instructions to the army to destroy all that belongs to them. The Amalekites, the Arab, Palestinian, and Muslim voters see children who should be playing and in school, wading through sewage-filled streets, drinking the dirty water from puddles, perhaps contaminated with sewage and bacteria from corpses left on the road to fester and rot, and dying from American complicit Israeli-imposed starvation when food, medicine, and whatever necessities are sitting in trucks at border crossings where even crutches, tents, ventilators are confiscated by the government of Israel. This evolving genocide of their kin, they are forced to watch, knowing that their tax dollars are being used to pay for the bombs and other weapons of destruction that are killing their relatives. These voters see you, who they help to put in power, and your administration begrudgingly, for the optics no doubt, give ones of millions of dollars for Palestinian aid to fatten the sacrificial lambs that their people have become, while you ply Israel with billions of dollars to butcher and slaughter the lambs. Cynical indeed. How much pain, stress, trauma, and agony must they be going through? Mr. Biden, History teaches us that we can do 1 million good deeds, but those deeds can be erased by one very egregious deed that would cause even the dead to rise up from their graves and cry out, "You have become the cow that gives a pail of milk and then turns around and kicks it over." Sometimes we have to take a principled moral stand, no matter the cost. We must be true to our conscience. That is, if we have not fled from or hidden it. However, sooner or later that conscience will always find us. In addition to the Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab voters who helped to put you in power, in those crucial swing states were members of the younger generation, aged 18 to 34 years of age. Most of them, having not hidden or fled their consciences as you and your administration have, are appalled, incensed, and horrified at what American complicity and weapons of destruction are doing to especially the children of Gaza. Mr. Biden, please do not insult the intelligence of the younger generation. Most of them are smart. While it is often said that experience teaches wisdom and that older is wiser, this, unfortunately, is not true. Because if it were true, older people would not keep doing the same things over and over again and expect different results. Many of the issues the world now faces would not exist. It would appear that you believe, as does Mr. Netanyahu, that brute force works. It has not worked out over the decades, because look at where we still are, no further ahead. Not all young people will drink the Kool-Aid that older people sometimes want to feed them. They're wiser and more principled than a lot of people in your generation and mine. We must respect the youth. They realize that the older generation has squandered much of their future. Some people believe that they have no future because they're not the manner born. The world is now a bed with two people lying in it. If one of the parties make the slightest of motions, the older party will surely feel it. The other party will surely feel it. That is how interconnected the world has become. They can see through the smoke in front of the mirror. No one can gaslight most of them to believe that it is sunny and dry when they're standing in the rain, seeing the raindrops and are getting soaked. Indeed, if they were sugar, they would melt. They will, on principle, stay home in November, and you will lose. Mr. Biden, you need to be present at the table of justice. You need to be principled in all your actions. If you're going to claim unto yourself a moral high ground, it cannot and must not be selective. Your empathy and tears must not be selective. Emulate the second president of the United States of America, John Adams. This founding father, a prominent advocate and proponent of the revolution and American independence, and one of the key players in the establishment of your republic, has not gotten the respect that he truly deserves. Together with James Baldwin and Samuel Adams, John Adams drafted the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the oldest functioning written constitution in the world that served as a model for the United States Constitution. John Adams was neither a perfect man. He struggled with vanity, nor a perfect president, the Seditions Act of 1798. But he was a principled man who practiced what he preached and was always present at the table of justice. He was blunt and straightforward. He was not at heart a politician, and much less a craven one. As a matter of fact, he disliked politics. John Adams believed that justice should be blind and dispensed without favor or fear. In other words, justice should be impartial and not selective, and indeed he practiced what he preached when in 1770 he defended the English Captain Preston and some of his soldiers who had fired on the mob of colonists who had attacked them intending to kill them. 5 of the colonists were killed. Adams, who, as previously mentioned, was a prominent advocate and proponent of the independence movement and revolution, chose to defend Captain Preston and his soldiers, despite the overwhelming public anger and backlash that he faced, because he knew that Captain Preston and his men had no choice but to defend themselves. Adams won the case. Consequently, he lost a large part of his law practice and income. Why did Adams, one of the staunchest advocates for the rebellion from tyranny, defend the representatives and enforcers of that same tyranny from which he and his fellow citizens sought to extricate themselves? Adams defended them because he believed that everyone, including our adversaries, deserved justice. John Adams also abhorred slavery. Of the first 12 presidents of the United States of America, he and his son, the 6th president, John Quincy Adams, were the only 2 who did not own slaves. Slavery, he believed, was a sin, and in his words, that foul contagion in the human character. He believed in the good country life of hard work, exercise, and pure air, as did Jefferson. However, while Adams worked in his fields, paying workers when he needed help, Jefferson enjoyed that goodness of hard work and country life, sitting on his veranda, watching his slaves work in the fields or in the house. Some of those working in the house were his own children, begotten with his wife's mulatto half-sister Sally Hemings, who, in the views he expounded, would be less than a full human, akin to a human animal. Lastly, John Adams often looked in the mirror of self-reflection. He knew his character flaws, and that included vanity, which he consciously tried to curb. John Adams knew his weaknesses and his strengths and was not afraid to admit them. Mr. Biden, this moment and these events demand that you be like John Adams and practice what you preach about empathy that you have rightly shown for the victims of Hamas and other fighters, and the victims and survivors of so many mass shootings in America, but have not shown for the tens of thousands of Palestinian victims, most of them children. Do you not think that the children in Gaza deserve to play, go to school, have roofs over their heads, and have an ice cream cone like the one you were eating on your trip to Michigan? Callously and dismissively saying these horrific, unjustifiable, vile acts that are all anathema to the soul, visited upon these hundreds of thousands of innocent children, perhaps more than 1 million, are things that happen in war, is not good enough. It is cruel and unkind. It is not Christian. Christ would never give excuses to be unkind. Our Palestinians such non-entities that you and your administration, especially what appears to be an amoral and immoral State Department, only begrudgingly mention in your common civilians without the distinction of Palestinians. In your comments, you have also failed to ever say Palestinian children and Palestinian women, of whom more than 20,000 have been slaughtered in your comments. While you and members of your administration, especially your amoral and immoral State Department, bring much attention to the sexual violence visited upon Israeli women by Hamas and other armed Palestinian fighters, rightly so. You have never mentioned or cared to bring attention to the sexual violence visited upon Palestinian women by Israeli soldiers. And security forces after October 7th. We also know that for decades there have been many allegations of sexual violence, including rape, visited upon Palestinian women, men, and children in Israeli detention centers and prisons during the years before October 7th, 2023. As a matter of fact, your ambassador to the United Nations, a black woman, the sexual violence for her inflicted on Palestinians and that inflicted on Israelis are not to compare. Palestinian women encounter the same shameful bias as black women did during the days of slavery and still do, along with other women of color in today's America. Sexual violence of all forms inflicted on it, be it men, women, or children, that includes girls and boys, whether to the first or nth degree in the ones, tens, or hundreds, is reprehensible and should never be used as a weapon of war. Unfortunately, it is too often the case, as we witness throughout history and are now also witnessing in Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo. It should not matter who the perpetrator or the victim is. Once again, sexual violence in any circumstance, including as a weapon of war, is reprehensible. Mr. Biden, neither you nor your administration have ever mentioned the fact that thousands of Palestinian women are forced to birth children like they're wild beasts in the forest, or that children must undergo amputations without anesthesia or painkillers, babies without formulas, nappies or diapers, or warm swathing. And what of the elderly, the sick, the infirm, the disabled, forced to flee at Israeli army gunpoint from hospitals to journey through the advertised, only to give the smokescreen of adhering to international humanitarian law, safe zones that are in reality death traps, where they are picked off like birds by sadistic Israeli army personnel. Once again, you callously and dismissively, with nary an ounce of empathy or remorse, say that these things happen in war. And yes, there are now more than 13,000 slaughtered children and thousands more unaccounted for, buried in whole or in parts under rubble which have now become their graves. O death, where is thy sting? O grave of rubble, where is thy victory? Not even babies left to rot can elicit any empathy from you or members of your administration, especially your amoral and immoral State Department. This behavior reeks of what appears to be so deep a hatred and dehumanization of an entire group of people that you and some members of your administration once again cannot even bear to say the word Palestinian in most instances. You can say Hamas, but not Palestinian. This action appears to reveal your belief that 2.27 million, that is 2.3 million minus 30,000 Hamas and other fighters, innocent Palestinian civilians in Gaza, one half of them children, are all Hamas, fit for eradication. This might explain why you, and especially your amoral and immoral State Department, are complicit in the slaughter and unfolding genocide in Gaza with your hollow, empty words of saving civilians. Is it because most are poor and dispossessed, made voiceless and invisible? America and the United Kingdom have helped to dispossess the Palestinian people and rendered them voiceless and invisible. And like blacks in America, the Palestinian people in Gaza and the West Bank, this ingenious entrepreneurial group of people have been held down and cannot truly prosper because of the boots of their oppressors on their necks. They do not want handouts. Is it because of religion? It could not be, because Palestinians are not only Muslims, they're also Christians like you, and at one time they were also Jews. In fact, Christianity is older in that region than Christianity in the Western world. It's older than Islam. Is it the color of so many Palestinians that brings on this apparent hatred? It surely could not be, because Israelis share the diverse colors and physical traits of Palestinians. Jews are of all colors, from very black to very fair, with diverse hair types and physical traits. Do not let anyone fool you, Mr. Biden, that the real Jews only come in one color, with one set of physical traits similar to yours. If you know the history of Jews going back thousands of years, you will know this is not so and why it could never be so. I, Mr. Biden, see in each Palestinian child's face the faces of my grandchildren. I see the faces of my grandchildren in every child on this earth, including the children in Israel, Sudan, and the DRC, who have to endure the pain, the destruction, and gratuitous violence inflicted upon them by adults and their forever wars. We must have equal empathy for every child on this earth. Each child, no matter the mask, such as religion, color, race, ethnicity, and economic status, belongs to all of us. And it is our duty to take care of all of them, each and every one of them. We cannot and must not be selective, shedding tears and having empathy for the hundreds, but sparing not a tear or having a drop of empathy in our cup for the tens of thousands, as did the man in the garden. Our cup of empathy is always full. The same place within us that we find hate is the same place we can find love. Mr. Biden, you give cover and excuses that 30,000 men who are in the shadows, without surveillance and other tools and weapons of war, like those possessed by the state of Israel, to keep track of and hold Palestinians in the West Bank hostage at will, are using 2.27 million people as human shields. That is a ridiculous proposition, much less a statement of fact that insults our intelligence. The intelligence of simple folks like me, not schooled in geopolitics, or rather geopolitics and politics, rather politricks. In reality, it would appear that it is Israel, you and your administration, and the rest of the self-appointed saviors and guardians of civilization, the United Kingdom, most of the European Union, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, who are using Hamas armed fighters as human shields to excuse the slaughter of tens of thousands of innocents, almost one half of them children, maim tens of thousands of innocents. More, displaced millions for what threatens to be a mass killing in what is already becoming the killing fields of Rafah. The venue for the closing argument, the final curtain call of Mr. Netanyahu. Indiscriminate bombings with thousands of multi-ton bombs that you provide, even bypassing Congress because it is so urgent to give to the fourth most powerful army in the world these weapons to use against 2.3 million minus or less 30,000 Hamas fighters, equal to 2.27 million innocent civilians, one half of them children, defies logic. Unless you believe, as does Mr. Herzog, the Israeli president, and a portion of the Israeli population, hopefully not the majority, that every Palestinian is guilty of the crimes of Hamas and other fighters. This would include those babies left to die and rot on the hospital beds, covered with debris of collapsed walls and ceilings, shattered glass, shrapnel and spent shells, beside incubators that could not function because of a denial of fuel and for lack of medicines or staff to take care of them. In addition to the denial of the necessities for the preservation of life, the staff, including doctors, nurses, assistants, heroes who they are kidnapped, tortured, beaten by cowards eager to post their vile deeds on social media, including the racist propaganda Israeli Defense Force, I call it a snuff channel, and TikTok. Many of those courageous medical personnel disappeared and perhaps to be found dead. These medical personnel have shown the love, dedication, conscience, principle, and courage that the cowards who wage war on defenseless children, you and so many others in power, seem to lack. Mr. Biden, you and your administration, especially your amoral and immoral State Department, have acted as pretend fireman with an empty water hose that has never been connected to a hydrant in one hand, and a true arsonist with a replenished gas can in the other, to keep burning a raging out of control fire that threatens to consume us all, including you, your administration, and your country. You, the leader of the most powerful country in the world, and your administration provide the weapons and the sorry excuses for the state of Israel that has the fourth most powerful army in the world, while the United Nations at the United Nations playing cynical games of abstaining even from a resolution you deemed okay, or quibbling about crossing many times already crossed T's and dotting many times already dotted I's to run out the clock, while so many children are being slaughtered, deliberately starved, dying of hunger, thirst, and disease. Yet, you have to beg and beseech Mr. Netanyahu to listen to you. By the way, Mr. Biden, that clock is now showing more than 30 to 1. 30 slaughtered Palestinians, half of them children, for every slaughtered Israeli and foreigner. And your imminent resolution will probably come to the floor at the end of March, your 6-month revenge time allocation for your 30 to 1 clock. You, Mr. Biden, and your mob of sheep, most of the European Union, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, the rest of the self-appointed saviors and guardians of Western civilization, will unabashedly contort yourselves to facilitate the slaughter and eventual genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza and eventually the West Bank. No group has or should be given a patent for cruelty, violence, or wanton destruction. No group has or should be given a copyright on suffering or victimhood. Where is your decency as human beings, as brothers in this brotherhood of man? Mr. Biden, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. Rather than compelling Israel to stop their vile actions, repeating history all over again, you prefer to contort yourselves, waste the money of your taxpayers, money that could be better spent in the case of America, on its crumbling infrastructure, degraded education system, feed the hungry children in America, provide early childhood education for the poor, health care, and the list goes on, to go through seas, hills, valleys, and winding roads, rather than the straight roads through the border crossings blocked by the government of Israel and some of its extremist supporters, to provide aid to millions of children, other innocent civilians. It is obvious that in the same manner that Israel permits you to circumvent its sea blockade to build a port that will take weeks or possibly months, and to fly unimpeded to drop crumbs from the sky, it should allow the thousands of trucks of aid waiting at the multiple border crossings to enter Gaza. With its killing of civilians waiting on aid trucks, it appears that Israel only wants Gazans to have the crumbs from the sky, thus the appearance of letting aid in, but in reality still starving the population. Once again, Mr. Biden, why do you not compel Israel to open its borders and let the aid in when you have the leverage? Well, Mr. Biden, your answer might be that you cannot tell Israel what to do because the United States of America does not interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. Since when? Most of the world, including many countries in Latin America, lest we forget the banana wars and Guatemala, Chile, and El Salvador would beg to differ. That is what America does best: interfere, rarely for the greater good of the masses of those countries. When you do not invade or prop up dictators and tyrants, you impose sanctions. What is the difference now when 2.3 million people have entered famine, including the Israeli hostages that are left, with more than 1 million infected with one or other communicable disease? This is the time when great powers should interfere for the greater good, to take a principled, universal, unquestionable moral stand. There is no selectivity. It is plain and it is clear. It is black and white without even a speck of gray. There should be no wavering, no equivocation. Mr. Biden, why all these circusy contortions? You are already involved in the war, supplying the arms to commit the slaughter. You do have leverage. Is your port a cover for America and Israel to make it appear that they want to get aid to Gazans, so that when those cases appear before a tribunal, and as much as there are so many toothless laws, something will stick? Or is your port another distraction, another delayed tactic to run out the clock? Is your port indeed a cover to give Israel another month to run out the clock, that growing 30 to 1 o'clock? Are there racists and supremacists, cult members in the cult of Bibi in your administration, especially in your amoral and immoral State Department, advising you and giving Mr. Netanyahu time to slaughter more of the Gazans, who they see as non-entities, little insects that ought to be squashed, not even worthy of the human, inhuman animals that the Israeli government has labeled them and set about creating the conditions to make it so? Perhaps there will be less to slaughter during the grand finale, Mr. Netanyahu's closing argument, coming sooner than we expect. Or perhaps your port might be finished to coincide with a Rafah invasion, to serve as a port for eventual ships of deportation or expulsion for Palestinians, to appear as if you're the saviors come to save them from American bombs and other weapons of destruction, including bulldozers that will come to destroy their tent city in Rafah. Or perhaps it is a distraction, a tacit go-ahead to continue the American complicit man-made famine. How many more children, emaciated with hollow eyes and sallow scaling skin, fainting, too weak to even groan from the pangs of hunger and thirst or the pain and ravages of disease, will die while waiting on your port? Or perhaps, Mr. Biden, this is another illustration of a much deeper than imagined American complicity in the heinous, unforgivable crimes being inflicted upon the Palestinian people in Gaza, as you seek to help Mr. Netanyahu undermine UNRWA. No doubt, this port will provide aid that will be distributed by other organizations as you try to replace UNRWA. A tall order indeed. By undermining UNRWA, you seek to impose whatever you wish on Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank if they survive to form an independent state. We must say they survive, because today and the present for most Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank are tenuous at best. There cannot be a tomorrow or future if there is neither a today nor a present. The only compromise will be on the part of the Palestinians. The creation of a Palestinian state has now been taken from the back burner and is once again one of the key requirements on your normalization agenda. Your administration, most of your mob of sheep, and some of the Muslim and Arab countries do not really care about the Palestinians. If not, this tragedy would not have continued for so many months. If you did care, there exists economic tools that the big boys and big girls understand could have brought to an end this indelible stain upon humanity that is unfolding. We do not know the true intention of this port. It might very well be all of the above reasons. I suspect that we might be able to surmise the main intention of this expensive and not necessarily efficient port if we know the names of the persons who came up with that plan. The identities, which I suspect are both American and Israeli, will shed some light. No doubt there will also be some profiteering, for the vampire that is revenge, with its bloodlust that is a bottomless pit, is always accompanied by its loyal foot soldiers and profiteers. Mr. Biden, I previously stated, UNRWA will more than likely not be involved in the distribution of aid as you try to show that this organization is not needed. You and your administration and your State Departments twice, highly likely, credible evidence, front page, evidence-free confirmation of the state of Israel. Evidence yet to be provided, allegations which appear to be based on forced confessions through torture by the idea of working in tandem to give supremacists their dream of undermining this lifeline and legitimacy for the Palestinian refugees that America and the United Kingdom helped to create. This undermining of UNRWA and the destruction of places that should remain sacrosanct even in wars follow an idea of pattern of first smear, then create the facts or rather fictions to back up the smear, or use the smear even without the fictions, including that of human shields, to destroy places such as shelters for displaced people, hospitals, clinics, schools and universities, museums, and even cemeteries. Another pattern is to commit the atrocity, lie, and if proven true by independent parties, give a cynical, unconvincing, it was a mistake. It does not take a rocket scientist to follow and to see those childish, predictable moves, laughable indeed, were it not that so many children and innocent civilians are being slaughtered. A 3-year-old could come up with better excuses, tricks and mirages with which Mr. Netanyahu, you, your administration and your mob of sheep, the mob of self-appointed guardians of civilization, try to feed and gaslight us, poor simple folks that we are. The arrogance and overconfidence of supremacists like Mr. Netanyahu and his cult lead them to believe that they're more intelligent than everyone else. The big boys and the big girls really think that most of us are indeed stupid. Mr. Biden, you and your mob of sheep will just move on after the grand finale. You will get your normalization with the blood of perhaps millions of innocents. At long last, rid of the troublesome child or the pest from Mr. Netanyahu and his ilk. But history teaches us that that which is hidden will one day come to light. And as you have had many surprises in your well-laid plans, laid in the back room with the other big boys and big girls, what is hidden might come out sooner than you think or want. At the end, after all this suffering, death, maiming countless orphans and so many Palestinians with lifelong trauma, you will offer your thoughts and prayers. Your thoughts and prayers will not resurrect the slaughtered. Your thoughts and prayers will only be as hollow as your oft-repeated saving lives, while you provide the bombs and other weapons of destruction to commit the slaughter and highly, highly likely credible evidence-free confirmation to excuse it. But then it will be what it will be. At the end of the day, the deed is done. You did what you wanted to do. Too late for your victims. And everyone moves on. Indeed, Mr. Biden, you and your administration are focused and clear-eyed that even if it means the extermination of the Palestinian pest or the troublesome child, that you will have your normalization between Israel and the Sunni Muslim and Arab world. Normalization is good and it would be welcome. It is good to live together with your neighbors in peace, security, and prosperity. How we get to normalization, if it is to endure. With all the crimes, the savagery, the wanton destruction, and the gratuitous violence against innocent civilians, animals, the grass, and even the dead, means Israel will continue to be alone. The rulers of Israel's neighbors, in spite of the control they have over their populations, cannot force their populations to love Israel and Israelis. It is essential that there be love and respect between the common man for normalization to really succeed. Love and respect is earned, not force. There's no time limit on either. And I might add, I know normalization is for forming a force against the axis of Iran and the rest of mostly Shia. But that is not our concern. That is not my concern. That is political. And all I know is that when two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. The Palestinians, in this case, happen to be the grass. On the other hand, the power of fear has a time limit. The state of Israel should know that. For more than 7 decades, force has only worked for a time until the next greater, more violent reaction to that force as a subjugated people try to remove the yoke from and boots off their necks and the shackles from their hands and feet. History has shown us this. Yet the madmen that is humankind keep doing the same thing over and over again. There is no perfection of techniques or tools for slavery, apartheid, and subjugation that will see anyone live forever in bondage. Once again, madmen doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, contrary to popular belief. Experience does not often teach wisdom. This is why history repeats itself. Mr. Biden, Mr. Netanyahu does not need you anymore. He was not a good partner to have in that back room with the big boys and big girls. He's a supremacist on a messianic mission and fighting for survival, for his freedom and what he sees as his final chance to realize his lifelong dream of the extermination of the pest and their dream of an independent state of Palestine. standing in his way to glory and his place in history above Moses and Joshua rolled into one. Nothing on his agenda was in line with yours. In Jamaica, they say, thief and thief, God laugh. There is no honor among thieves. You, more than likely, gave away one of your greatest leverages, which were the weapons. In bypassing Congress with your little make plenty shipments, contrary to what you want us to believe, Mr. Netanyahu probably has enough weapons to last him quite a few months, to take him to the time when he's counting on for your opponent to enter the White House. He, no doubt a very shrewd and intelligent man, probably convinced you that was the best way to do it, because a time would have to come when the clock would have to stop, lest you ruin your election prospects. If this were the case, that shrewd shark, that ruthless and wily politician outsmarted you, Mr. Biden. If your opponent gets in the White House, Mr. Netanyahu will have everything he wants from America and have free rein to do what he will in the West Bank and Gaza. Not that he's not already doing what he wants. Granted, there's not even a millimeter of difference of daylight between you and your opponent when it comes to Israeli policy. Mr. Netanyahu knows that he can bring pressure to bear on you via other politicians because of their cravenness. As a matter of fact, Mr. Netanyahu believes he has more power than you do, and perhaps he does. Indeed, Mr. Netanyahu believes, and he probably does, hold the handle of the knife, and you hold the blade. That explains in part his arrogance, overconfidence, lack of respect, and lack of gratitude. Mr. Biden, Mr. Netanyahu believes you are a spent force, and the shrewd shark that he is smells blood in the water. He will let go of the rope on which he has you dangling. He is about to stomp on your fingers, the fingers holding on to that ledge on the 99th floor that is helping to protect you from gravity. He will ensure that he creates as many problems for you. Forever wars, perhaps finally attack Iran to force American boots on the ground for you, already provide the weapons, ensuring that you will lose in November. Yes, indeed, Mr. Netanyahu knows that he holds the rope and the handle of the knife, even for the president of the most powerful country in the world. Why is this so? Once again, this is because of the cravenness and unprincipled behavior of many, too many American politicians. Mr. Biden, if you believe in your Christian afterlife, you should start preparing the answers that you will have to give to the higher ones. When the Archangel Gabriel sounds his trumpet on Resurrection Morn, when they ask why you, Joe Boy Biden, felt you had a right to facilitate the slaughter of lives that you did not and cannot create, what will your answer be when they ask you why you, Joseph Biden, accepted that great power but absconded from and dodged that even greater responsibility? What will your answer be when they ask if you, Joseph Biden, brought the fame, the place in history, and the riches of the great Morn with you, because obviously, without baggage, each one of us arrives on earth, and without baggage we must depart. What will your answers be, Joe Biden? What will your answers be? Alas, these are not the days of ancient Egypt, ancient China, or the Vikings, when many, including the kings, ruling class, and others were buried with much of their earthly treasures. There is no moving van that allows or that follows a hearse in these times. And even if it were so, while to dust the body physical returns, the contents of the moving van, depending on the makeup, would remain in the grave. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. Look into a garbage dump. In the final analysis, only our deeds, correct or incorrect, matter. When the Archangel Gabriel sounds his trumpet on Resurrection Morn, what will your answers be, Mr. Biden? What will your answers be? Remember, you cannot lie and you cannot spin over yonder. They see through all this smoke, and I believe you will have to face those whose lives you could have spared, but did not when you had the great earthly power to do so. You, in that afterlife, will be no more important than your victims. They will be the ones to teach you. For whatever reason, you and your conscience, when you find it, or it certainly will find you, must answer why you believe that you have the right to facilitate what appears the impending slaughter and or expulsion of almost 2.3 million people who have been rendered voiceless and invisible because they have neither money nor anyone of great power to advocate or to speak on their behalf. Sometimes, Mr. Biden, God spoils a picture to save our soul. That angel has thrown that stone to spoil that picture. That picture, that perfect picture from the back room of the big boys and the big girls has been spoiled. Mr. Netanyahu has not been a good or cooperative partner. Make haste and change course because time is running out. You have been given a warning from the angel, but I fear that like a stubborn ram, you are not heeding the warning and are continuing to head over that precipice. You are still not listening. You still continue to believe in the brilliance of your mirage and optics, all smoke in the mirror. An embargo or conditions on the weapons you send to Israel will only be another optics and mirage, for you have already sent more than enough to last for many months to come until the voters head to the polls. If such should be the case, then Mr. Netanyahu will prove to us if what you declare is so, because he will sincerely do as you request. We simple folks have already blown away the smoke, and we can see the mirror and your reflection. That reflection is that of a man whose head is bowed because the crown of virtue is too heavy for his head, and the cloak that is the mantle of virtue has fallen off shoulders too narrow. A pretender to the throne of virtue. Mr. Biden, your reflection is the same as the brother you judged to be standing on the low ground of your selective moral high ground. Obviously, you and the rest of the self-appointed saviors and guardians of Western civilization have yet to see your true reflections in that mirror. Mr. Biden, you have been given great power, and of you is required even greater responsibility. That greater responsibility demands that you be present at the table of justice, as John Adams always was, and to practice what you preach, as he did. Mr. Biden, American democracy rests on your shoulders, not on the shoulders of the Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab voters who are already burdened and traumatized by what is happening to members of their families, neighbors, and friends, each one with a name and a life story. Mr. Biden, American democracy rests on your shoulders, not on the shoulders of the young people who now see you as someone for whom they should not have voted, and in hindsight should have followed their first instinct and stayed home. If you do not change course, you and your administration will fall over the precipice that the angel tried to warn you about when they threw the stone, taking American democracy with you into oblivion. It will be on your watch, and with your complicity and active participation, should the genocide of the Palestinian people of Gaza and the West Bank occurs. Pray I that it never comes to that. Your Palestinian, Muslim, and Arab voters and many of the young people will never forgive you, and you will indeed lose. Mr. Biden, is your disdain for the Palestinian people greater than your love for America and its democracy? Only you can answer that question, Mr. Biden. Do you want to be remembered in history as the president who actively and knowingly facilitated the genocide of Palestinians and squandered American democracy to follow a supremacist, racist, and divisive, craven hate-monger, alleged butcher of Palestinian children? Let us see what other names and titles Mr. Netanyahu will create for himself in the days and the weeks ahead that will follow him into the annals of history, or rather the dungeons of infamy. I pray for his soul and the sake of the Palestinian people that he will create no other names or titles for himself. Mr. Biden, with your active participation, via the weapons you provide to commit the unfolding genocide of Palestinians, your State Department has become one of, if not the most amoral and immoral in decades, rivaling that of your predecessor. Your State Department in this war operates on personal petty policies that neither serves the strategic interests of America, the State of Israel, or the world. It is conduct unbecoming of the world's most powerful country. Some in your State Department have learned the wrong lessons from history and could never be honoring the memory of anyone with such conduct. Mr. Biden, I am no lawyer, just a simple, unschooled human being. But I do believe that when those in your State Department, in the same breath as they speak about saving lives, say, blame Hamas for the starvation and slaughter of civilians, one half of them children, to justify your complicity and accessory to genocide, that would be only chit-chat and rabin tree, not an argument for the courtroom. It is Israeli soldiers who are dropping American bombs on children, decapitating little girls and their dolls as they sleep. Not Hamas fighters. It is Israeli soldiers who are using American guns to ambush and butcher mothers and children holding white flags, not Hamas fighters. It is Israeli soldiers who mutilate dehydrated children standing in line for water. It is Israeli soldiers who, with American guns, shoot starving Palestinians in their heads and legs as they seek flour from aid trucks. It is, indeed, Israeli soldiers committing the crimes with American weapons. It is you and your amoral and immoral State Department that willingly and knowingly provide the weapons, even though you know the criminal activities for which they are intended. You even flout your own laws, and those who indeed do so in your amoral and immoral State Department should one day be held accountable. These are the things that give away the jig as you, and especially your amoral and immoral State Department, try to hoodwink and bamboozle your voters and the world. Mr. Biden, it is time for you to say to Mr. Netanyahu and his government of extremists, as well as what appears to be cult members in the cult of Bibi, followers of the Netanyahu brand of supremacist ideology and practices in your amoral and immoral State Department, these words from the gospel chorus. My young companion, fare thee well. I will not go with you to hell. I'm on my way to Canaan land. I will not go with you. My young companion, fare thee well. I will not go with you to hell. I'm on my way to Canaan land. I will not go with you. What would John Adams think about all this? For Adams, the answers and decisions would be so simple because truth and justice, virtue are simple. The situation would never have gotten to the point where the angel had to spoil a picture to save John Adams' soul, for he was a decent and fair man who practiced what he preached. He meant what he said and said what he meant. This is why he was not a story diplomat. He was too honest. As a man who was astute to history and human nature, it would be very sad that one of his fears might be realized, that America would in the end not be able to keep its democracy. John Adams would be truly disappointed, but not surprised in the least. Finally, Mr. Biden, history teaches that for each of us, there is always amazing grace. None of us is without blemish. Every one of us, all brothers in the brotherhood, this brotherhood of man, no matter our spiritual mistakes and incorrect actions, can find amazing grace. Pray I that what I fear, being an observer of both history and human nature, that certain things will not come to pass. Pray I that all the big boys and big girls in the back room, including Mr. Netanyahu and the extremists in his government, you, Mr. Biden, and your administration, especially your amoral and immoral State Department, as well as the extremist members of Hamas and other fighters, will find amazing grace before it is too late for the Palestinian people of Gaza and the West Bank, as did the author of the song of the same name, John Newton, slave trader turned Anglican cleric and abolitionist, after his near-death experience in 1748 on the ship the Greyhound off the coast of Ireland. May we never try to flee our conscience so that we will always do correct actions. May we learn to walk a mile in our brother's shoes so that we can see the humanity in each other. May we respect the differences in each other and know that our Creator has no chosen few. May we find comfort in the knowledge that each of us is slated for redemption and none is excluded. May we find solace in the knowledge that it is not a question of if, but one of when each of us shall return to our Father. May we know that we are just tenants on this earth and take care of each other, the earth and all the creatures that dwell thereon. May we always adhere to the divine principles of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, doing unto others as we would have them do unto us, love. May we know that which I do unto my brother, I do unto myself, for I am my brother's keeper. May the tiny shrouds of light forever illuminate our path to the dark. May peace forever reside within us and between us. One divine, universal love. Written by W. Davis, March 2024. Parts are excerpts from the books Thoughts on the Past and A Broken Record, History on Rewind, written by the same author, 2024, copyright and published.